Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, John. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be speaking on the same platform as my old friend, John Chipman. Congratulations on everything you're doing with the IISS, John. And someone once said that life is one damn Balliol man after another. That's certainly the case this evening with these speeches. It's a great honor to be speaking here at this Manama dialogue in this 200th anniversary year of the friendship between Britain and Bahrain. I've just come from an audience with His Majesty King Hamad, during which we hailed the strength of a friendship that has been unbroken and that was inaugurated in 1816 by one Captain William Bruce, who rejoiced in the title of British Resident in the Gulf. In between chasing slavers and harrying pirates, he discovered that milk from the local cows was a cure for smallpox. As he said, of the truth of it, I have not the smallest doubt. I have asked some 40 or 50 persons, which strikes me as a really solid piece of medical research. And perhaps lured by this magic milk, the British came in growing numbers to the region until 1861, when the UK and Bahrain signed a treaty of perpetual peace and friendship. And through 2 world wars, assisted by all sorts of formalities of friendship and fealty, the relationship progressed until 1968. And then something went wrong. Not here, not in the Gulf, but in London. And so I want us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, to drag our eyes back from this splendid dinner to a less opulent scene, to Britain in January 1968, a nation in the grip of a freezing winter, with debts so bad that we were dependent, as Harold Wilson put it, on the mercy of the gnomes of Zurich. And apologies to any gnomes for his political incorrectness. Britain, where the snow was so deep that kids couldn't get to school, the Beatles were on the verge of breaking up, and the national self-confidence had sunk like mercury in the thermometer. And I want to take you into that cabinet room where 2 powerful figures were battling over the direction, the whole orientation of the country. On the one side, there was Roy Jenkins, the urbane Chancellor of the Exchequer, with his frog-like beam, yearned to take Britain into what was then called the European Common Market, even though we'd already been rejected twice by nos amis. And in the other corner, there was the colourful and brilliant Foreign Secretary, George Brown, the man who gave the euphemism tired and emotional to the English language, a man who once went up to a lovely scarlet-clad creature at an embassy soiree in Peru and asked for the honour of dancing a waltz and was rebuffed on 3 grounds. The first was that he was drunk. The second was that this was not a waltz, but the Peruvian national anthem. And the third was that his interlocutor was the Cardinal Archbishop of Lima. And those were the 2 adversaries, ladies and gentlemen. Roy Jenkins, George Brown. The argument went on in cabinet, as the records attest, for 7 consecutive meetings, breaking sometimes only for a brief meal, lasting in total 36 hours of debate. And what was that argument about? I'm sure you know. It was about Britain's role in the Gulf and everywhere east of Suez, and whether this country, our country, my country, could any longer afford it. And Roy Jenkins said that British overseas expenditure was already running at £381 million a year. By the way, when you think about it, that's less than we give in overseas development aid to some countries these days. And he said that spending had to be cut back. And George Brown came back very strongly. Yes, Europe was important, he accepted, but so was the rest of the world. And he made the key point that military and political partnerships went hand in hand with trade and economic growth. And on went this debate in tones that contemporaries described as icy, bad-tempered, furious, until, I'm afraid, Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister, summed up in favor of the defeatists and the retreatists. George Brown lost. The flag came down, the troops came home from Borneo, from the Indian Ocean, from Singapore, and yes, from the Gulf. And we lost our focus. We in the UK lost our focus on this part of the world. And so tonight, I want to acknowledge that this policy of disengagement east of Suez was a mistake. And insofar as we are now capable, and we're capable of a lot, we want to reverse that policy, at least in this sense, that we recognize the strong historical attachment between Britain and the Gulf, and more importantly, we underscore the growing relevance and importance of that relationship in today's uncertain and volatile world. We're here at the Manama Dialogue, and I'm following a stellar series of emissaries, including the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister, to make a strategic point that was symbolized by the GCC inviting our Prime Minister Theresa May to be the guest of honor at their summit. That any crisis in the Gulf is a crisis for Britain from day one. That your security is our security, and that we recognize the wisdom of those who campaign for a policy of engagement east of Suez. That your interests, military, economic, political, are intertwined with our own. And of course, I'm not some sort of mad, I don't believe we can run the flag, the Union Jack, back up on every outpost around the world, even if anybody in my country or anywhere else wanted us to do so, and they certainly don't. But we are here to reopen HMS Jafar, a naval support facility here in Bahrain that His Majesty the King just told me he remembered from his childhood before our disengagement. We are renewing military ties with old friends. Britain's Gulf Defence Staff is being located in Dubai. The Al Minhad Air Base in the UAE provides a hub for the RAF. In Oman, the British Army is establishing a regional land training centre, one of only 4 in the world, and creating a permanent presence in the Sultanate. We cooperate intensively with our friends in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere on counter-terrorism, in sharing military technology in what is still a highly dangerous geopolitical landscape, where the spores of terrorism can be incubated and are incubated, not just in the Middle East, but in our own country as well. And it is absolutely right that we should so share and cooperate, because our interests and our problems are shared. And that's why Britain has, in total, 1,500 military personnel in the region, 7 warships, more than any other Western nation apart from the US. We're spending £3 billion on our military commitments in the Gulf over the next 10 years. And that's deepening a partnership that is stronger than with any other group of nations in the world outside NATO. Together with our allies in the Gulf, all the countries in this room, we're fighting to defeat Daesh in Iraq and in Syria, and we are winning. The RAF is the second biggest contributor to the airborne strike missions after the Americans, and together we've helped dramatically to reduce the footprint of that terrorist organization. We're steadily exposing the absurdity of their pretensions to be a caliphate. And of course, we all know the immensity of the challenges that we face in this region. Helping, we all got to help, when stability is finally restored in Iraq, to rebuild and to unify that country. And we all know, as the Prime Minister said only a few days ago, that we must be clear-eyed and vigilant about the role of Iran. And yes, I believe it was worth spending 12 years to negotiate the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement with Iran. I do. I think it was a genuine achievement of diplomacy that has helped to make the world a safer place. And I think we must build on this foundation and try to develop a better relationship with Tehran. But that can only happen if Iran plays by the same rules and exercises its influence by diplomacy and by dialogue. And so, when you look at what's happening in Yemen, where the hand of Iran is clearly visible, I, of course, understand Saudi concerns about security and the paramount importance of Saudi Arabia securing itself from bombardment by the Houthis. But I must also share my profound concern, which I'm sure is universal in this room, about the present suffering of the people of Yemen. And I think we can all agree on at least this key point, that force alone will not bring about a stable Yemen. And that's why we in London have been working so hard with all our partners to drive that political process forwards. And the same point about the need, above all, for a political solution can be made about every other conflict and struggle in this region. Yes, it may very well be true that after months of barbaric bombing, Bashar al-Assad and his Russian and Iranian sponsors are on the point of capturing the last of rebel-held Aleppo, perhaps within a matter of days. We can't know. But if and when that happens, it will assuredly be a victory that turns to ashes in his mouth, a Pyrrhic victory. Remember that 2/3 of Syria is currently outside Assad's control and that he is still besieging 30 other areas comprising 571,000 tormented inhabitants. Surely to goodness there can be no lasting peace in Syria if that peace is simply reimposed by a man who has engendered such hatred among millions of his own people. And that's why there must be a political solution in Syria in which the people of Syria take the lead. Of course, we can all work together to try and bring about peace and stability. But ultimately, it must be up to the people of those countries to find the leadership and the solutions from within themselves, to reach out across communities, to build unity with their own new and uplifting national narratives. And the best way we can all help, all of us, the whole region, is to answer these social and economic challenges, to meet the demands of this amazingly young and growing, all of you look amazingly young, of course, goes without saying, but amazingly young and growing population. And what they need is the prospect of an exciting economic future. They need jobs. And it's here, I think, that there's so much we can do together. And I think now is the time for all of us to recognize the wisdom of those East of Suez cabinet members round the table in Britain in 1968. Now is the time to build partnerships and relationships that can deliver for all of our constituents, whether in the UK or in the Gulf. And now is the time, I think, for my country, our country, the UK, to seize the opportunities of leaving the EU. And let me stress, as I've told many representatives from the Gulf who've been to see me, that though we may be extricating ourselves from the treaties of the European Union, we are not leaving Europe. That would be geographically, culturally, physically, intellectually, aesthetically, morally impossible to do. You couldn't take Britain away from the European continent unless you towed us out into the middle of the Atlantic and tried to shell us with. It's not going to happen. We're going to be part of Europe. We'll be part of Europe's security architecture. We'll be there to work for European peace and stability. And by the way, we'll still be able to stick up for our friends and partners in the Gulf. But now, for the first time since the 1970s, we will additionally be able to do free trade deals. And we'll be able to build on the extraordinary commercial relationships that already exist between the UK and the Gulf. And I used to be, as some of you may dimly recollect, I used to be Mayor of London. And look at the impact of the Gulf on London. Look at one of the most popular buildings now in our city, indeed the tallest building in the UK, the Shard. I think I opened it at least twice. The only building I know of that doesn't look as though it was placed on the surface of the earth, but rather erupting through it, through the skin of the planet, like the tip of some super-colossal cocktail stick, erupting through a gigantic pickled onion. All of it, the whole thing, I think the Qataris, as they own the Olympic Village, Harrods, Chelsea Barracks, the UAE, Excel, I seem to remember, the tidal array, so much of our energy coming from that fantastic green investment in the estuary. It's thanks to investment from the Gulf that we have such vital pieces of transport infrastructure in our capital city as the DP World Port, and of course, the Emirates cable car, indispensable for transport. As everyone, thank you very much for that small murmur of assent from the front. In fact, it's a little-known fact that Kuwait owns City Hall itself. Did you know that? I didn't know it until today, but I'm stunned to find it out. I don't know whether our Kuwaiti friends want to claim credit for all City Hall's policies, including the very, very popular cycle superhighways, which we're now extending. But when you consider, it's a sign of the closeness of our relationship, and when you consider that we have 20,000 Gulf students in London, 20,000, and they're very, very welcome indeed, as I may say, are their fees. When you think of the academic exchanges, the cultural exchanges, you can see why London is sometimes called the eighth emirate. I think I may have made that one on myself, but anyway. But we're proud of it. We're proud of it. And of course, we get the ball back over the net in our own modest British way. Brits pay 1.7 million visits to the Gulf every year. We export colossal and growing numbers of Jaguar Land Rovers. Marks and Spencer is here in force. I was told just now that we've done a big deal to sell Rolls-Royce aero engines to Gulf Air. And it really is true, because I took the trouble to verify this myself, it really is true that for the purposes of some Gulf bunkers, we have managed to export sand to Saudi Arabia. And it's true. And all that adds up to an export market for the UK in the Gulf region worth £20 billion a year. We sell more to the Gulf than we do to any other non-EU export market, second only to the United States. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this evening, after almost 50 years since that famous disagreement in the British cabinet, which went the wrong way. I hope that we can conclude this evening with the reflection that the conversation has really ended in a triumphant vindication of Lord George Brown, at least in this sense, that Britain is back east of Suez. Not as the greatest military power on earth, though we certainly pay our share and we certainly have fantastic capabilities, not as the sole guarantor of peace, though we certainly have a huge role to play, but as a nation that is active in and deeply committed to the region. And I want to stress that this is not just about politics, it's not just about trade, it's not just about strategic support. This is about building on and intensifying old friendships. Britain has been part of your story for the last 200 years, and we will be with you for the centuries to come. Thank you very much.